Just a quick question for y'all. Just kind of find out the tone of the crowd here, where everybody stands on election transparency, I'm going to call it. How many people here think New York does a really good job with our elections? Raise your hand.
No.
Okay. How many people think there's probably some shenanigans going on, but probably not enough to affect the outcome of our election? Okay. So how many people think that all those things that are going on are affecting our elections? Okay. I think everybody knows where we stand here. Okay. So I have a friendly crowd. That makes it easy.
You're a fascist.
So I was at, a week ago, Monday night, I was at gave a presentation to the Amherst Republican Committee, and I got called an election denier, or whatever that is.
So is Hillary Clinton, by the way.
An election denier, that's correct. She sued in 5 different states in 2016, exactly, and 5 million Democrats signed a petition to decertify 2016. Interesting. All right, so attack of the clones, weaponized voter rolls in New York State. So I think most people know about us. We did a presentation, I think it was back in the early spring last year. But just in case you don't know about us, we were founded in July of 2021. We're grassroots, all volunteers, not necessarily all Republicans. We've got people who voted for Biden and are Democrats as part of us. We're nonpartisan. We have teams in every county. And if you want more information, our website is auditny.com. There's a ton of information there. Please go there and check out what we've got. Next slide. So what we did last July and August in the summer is we got data from 4 official sources, most of which was obtained through Freedom of Information Law requests, or FOIL, in New York State. We got information from the State Board of Elections, the Secretary of State Certified Results, the Precinct's tabulation results, and some counties. Good thing I know what it says. There we go. Some counties. And we did get our voter rolls from Chautauqua. That's good. And I believe a good chunk of our FOIL requests were returned from Chautauqua County, but not all of them. Next slide. So what we found was 8 different categories of election irregularities in New York State. We found more registrations than population, multiple registrations per voter, ineligible registrations, more votes than voters, discrepant official sources, missing voter records, missing votes, and irregular votes. Next slide. There are at least 2.3 million registrations in question in New York State.
Wow.
So excess voter IDs, more than 321,000. Some of this data is a little older. Some of our newer numbers are higher, but at least that. In just 7 counties, okay, we don't even have the records from all the counties in New York State, but in 7 counties, just under 1.9 million missing voter records. Missing votes in just 5 counties, 223,640. Irreconcilable official counts, so those 4 counts, they don't agree. 334,615. The interesting one, blank addresses, 138,000. So if you're going to vote in a county or in New York State and you go to register, one of the things you have to do is prove that you live in that county, right? In the state. So you have to show some kind of proof. It can be a bill. It doesn't necessarily have to be your ID, but you have to show something with your name and your address on it. So how do we have blank addresses, and how are they voting? So official counts from sources don't agree. The greatest discrepancy was between the Secretary of State and the State Board of Elections, 334,615. And the biggest vote count discrepancy, 82.8% in all of New York, was in the 5 boroughs of New York City. So you can see this nice graph here with the big spikes. Those are the 5 boroughs. And if you look closely in the bottom, you'll see little squiggly lines, little tiny little blips. Those are the other counties.
Is that Jamestown on the end?
It's a Jamestown on the end. Next slide. Oh, went too far. One too many. There we go. High voter registration. One of the things we found that I listed in the beginning there, more people registered to vote than are eligible to vote. 6 New York counties had in excess of 100% voter registrations for or labeled. Erie, Nassau, Westchester, and Wyoming. Interesting to me that Wyoming is in that mix. Not a very big county in terms of population. Next slide. We found missing records. I highlighted Erie just because it was the closest one to here. So the difference, let's see, between the New York State Board of Elections and the County Board of Elections, there was a 456,247 difference, right? So 1 million at the New York State level, and almost half.
What does that exactly mean, missing record?
They're missing. So the records that we looked at New York State had a bunch of registrations, and then you compare it to the county, and there are that many registrations and that many records that aren't in the county voter rolls, missing. Or, yeah, in this case, the county. Yep.
Kim?
Yes.
Just to say real quickly, the comparison, isn't it, the county submits the voter registration, their records, to the state, so the state should just have a duplication of what all the counties.
Yes, the county is responsible for maintaining the records. It should, so the discrepancy, exactly. And also missing votes. Oh, go back for Erie. It's a lot less. So again for Erie, 10,916 between the State Board of Election rolls and the county election rolls, right? But you can see here some of the other ones. Onondaga only has an 18 difference, like 18 records, so that's much more reasonable, right? I mean, we don't want anybody lost, but that makes much more sense as opposed to New York City with 195,000 difference. Next slide. I like this little meme. Good news, dear, the legislature won't let the county clerks remove your name from the voter rolls. Just keep voting. And yes, we did find some deceased voters who voted. Not that many though, 131. Purge voters, 1,176. And late registration, 27,639. So late registration is an interesting one. So they registered after the cutoff, right? Yeah, in some cases, after the election, they registered too. We found that. Purge voters, those are people that are supposedly off the rolls. They're not supposed to vote, like they moved away or whatever, but some of them are still voting.
When we work the polls, they say to us, every person votes. And it's like, I even asked the question, what if they haven't registered yet? And they basically say every person votes.
Well, they don't actually, technically they're not supposed to vote. They may be given a provisional ballot.
That's exactly what
Right.
happens, but and then that's open for someone's judgment call, correct?
Rather than what's supposed to happen is then your Board of Elections at the county level is supposed to double check on that person on the provisional ballot.
Yeah.
Because you don't always know when you're looking at the poll book or the sheet.
Whether they have registered or not.
Right, exactly. And we know that they don't do it right, so.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
But they would be given a provisional ballot in that
Yes,
case.
yes, I
yes.
understand that.
Okay, next slide. So kind of back to some basics. In New York State, you get a State Board of Elections ID number and a county ID number. You only are supposed to get one unique SBOE ID number. It's similar to a Social Security number, but you can have multiple CID numbers. So you get, say you live in Chautauqua County, you go to register to vote, you get your SBOE ID number, say that 10 times fast. And then you also get your CID number, and then you decide to move up by me, and you're gonna live in Erie, so you'll keep your state number, and you'll get a new CID number. Makes perfect sense. And then maybe you decide to move, if you want to go down by New York City, and you decide to move to Westchester, again, you'd keep your state number, you'd get a new CID number. So you could end up with 3 CID numbers. That's legitimate, hopefully. But you should only have 1 SBOE ID number. And the key thing is votes are attached to that state number, which makes sense, right? 1 vote. All right, next slide. So to create fake votes, fake voters are needed. There are 321,000 plus, we found more, SBOE ID numbers. And those original records have over 750,000 extra registrations created. So some people might have 1 clone, some people might have 2 clones. So it's over-registration by cloned DNA yours. Next slide. So I wanted to show you 4 different ways we found that there are falsified records or registrations in the voter rolls. We run the voter rolls through 24 different flags, okay? And some of them are obvious. Is the person dead or not? You know, are they, what age they are, things like that. But then there's some other ones. This one is algorithmically modified names, cloned registration. So the important thing is the date of birth, the address is the same. All that is the same, but there might be one small difference in the name. So you can see in this, the first column in that first graph is last name, second is last name, and then I have the change types.
Sorry. Timing's messed.
And then the second graph is first name changes. So the example I like to use is Catherine. If you might spell your name Catherine with a Y, the name might be slightly switched, Catherine with an I. And there's so many of them that we actually group them. We have change types. And we don't think they're natural, we think they're algorithmically placed there. Next slide. This is change of address. So this person actually was a volunteer with New York Citizens Audit. She lived in New York City, she registered to vote, she moved out of state, told the Board of Elections she was moving, and then a couple of years later she moved back in state and into a different county, registered to vote. When we looked up her records, we discovered that she had 2 SBOE ID numbers. Everything was the same, and she happens to have a really unique name, like no one has it. And what happened was they just switched the middle initial slightly. So she has 2 active records that are voting. Next slide. Married Baden is another example. So this person actually happens to be from Erie, and all these names are changed, so they're not the real people, obviously. She was living with her parents. She got married, registered at a new address. She should have kept her same SBOE ID number, but instead they gave her a new one. And the interesting thing there is both records were voting. So even though it's a different last name, both records were voting in the same elections. Next slide. This gentleman is interesting. He has 11 SBOE ID numbers. So this is sequential excess SBOE ID numbers. So if you look in that first column, you can see his SBOE ID number is 171, 172, 173, all the way down. The second column is the registration date, so they were all registered on the same day.
So how does that happen?
Well, maybe the person did it. I don't know. I mean, maybe you can understand by accident twice. I don't know how that happens. But then you go down a little further and you notice the registration date is actually 1 day before, but the number, the SBOEID number is 8,513 higher. So if it's sequentially given, how does that happen? Next slide. So if your identity was stolen, so you have a cloned identity, that means you're a victim of identity theft. So under New York State election law, cloned registration, like some of the examples I showed, equals 3 felonies, or could equal 3 felonies. And many of these cloned registrations voted in multiple elections. So that's 3 more felonies. And if you add all those up, we're looking at over 1 million felonies in the voter rolls right now. Yeah?
So somebody votes, and how do they flag them? How do they find these people to arrest them?
So that's one of the things we're working on, and it's one of the things why canvassing is so important, because what we're canvassing is some of those cloned records. So we're going to the voter who probably doesn't know they were cloned at all, because remember, a lot of this is up at the state level, not at the county level, and we're asking them which one. So if you were made in, say...
What if they're the clone?
Well, most of them are the same person, right? So if it's maiden married, that's the same person, that's one person. And she may not know that somebody's voting for her other alternate identity is voting.
So I guess the way to put it is a vote is being assigned to that alternate identity without the voter knowing. The voter has
So in other words, when she votes, she's voting 3 times.
No, she's voting once. She goes to the polling station, she votes. And then somehow, she doesn't know, but somebody else or possibly some other, I'm going to get into something called the matrix we're calling, or the algorithm in the voter rolls. Something else might be putting those votes in place.
Okay, so it's not an actual person.
Voting for her? It could be. It could be.
somebody at the state level has some
But it also could be,
situation that's
yeah.
putting votes in.
but that person may not know. So you're being set up for felonies. You wouldn't know that. And there's no way for you as an individual to get extra SBOEID numbers, with everything equal, because they're supposed to check for that. They check your social security number, the last 4 digits, and then they check the motor vehicle records. So they're supposed to check. Yeah. Yes?
What's the statute of limitations on the felony for that?
I'm not 100% sure. I don't know. But good question. Yeah. All right. Next slide. So I just put this up here. Not saying who won or who lost. But in New York State, in the last presidential election, the victory margin was 1.9 million, and I already mentioned there were 2.3 million questionable registrations. Next slide. And there's a down ballot dilemma. The vote discrepancies and irregular votes are sufficient to change outcome of approximately 100 down ballot races across dozens of counties. And that's 38% of the New York State legislature and 41% of our congressional races. The number of invalid and illegal registrations with votes assigned to them outstrips their margin of victory. And I put this on this slide, but basically 32% of the New York State Assembly, 21% of our Senate, 4% of our representation in Congress ran unopposed by the Republican Party. So they walked right in, and most of them were your socialist progressives. So when they come asking for money, ask why. I always talk about the case in New Jersey. He was a truck driver, did a grassroots campaign, and took out the head of their legislature in New Jersey. So, obviously that's an extreme example, but it can be done.
He spent very little money.
And he spent very little money doing it. That's exactly right. So I wanted to put some Chautauqua numbers in here. The total number of irregular votes in Chautauqua County are 2,861. So we have a smaller population. You should see what Erie's looks like. If you go to our website, auditny.com, you can click on a county and you can see basically something similar to this on each county. So you can look at Cattaraugus, you look at Erie, you can look at Suffolk or wherever you want. And that's under the county page. So the discrepancies are there. I think the greatest one was between the New York State Board of Elections and the precinct tabulation count of 919. There are 1,979 duplicate SBOEID numbers assigned, 30 of which voted. 83% of the voting age population of Chautauqua County is registered to vote, and typical registration is somewhere around 60 to 70%, so it's a little high. And there are some age groups that have higher than that. So for some reason, age 43 and 71 has 95% over registration, and then age 74 is 103%. Those blank addresses, this is kind of a high number. 1,184 people voted without a resident address. So how do we know they even live in your county? 475 people registered after the cutoff date and voted. 253 people from nursing homes. The only reason I have that in there is we don't always know, did they vote? Did somebody vote for them? You'd have to canvass it to determine for sure. And then there's maybe some people, if you've been following election integrity, you might have heard of Dr. Frank. He did a mathematical analysis that is quite complicated to explain quickly. But basically what he found was that in the states that he looked at, that you could figure out voter turnout by just looking at their age, and the same thing happened in New York State. And basically what it means is that the turnout numbers, the records aren't organic or natural, they're algorithmically or possibly algorithmically produced. Next slide.
Does
So-
this information go to each of the Board of Elections in each county? Have you guys provided this to the Board of Elections in each county?
Yes, we did.
So you guys did what
We
you
did
like?
do a presentation to the county, and we gave them the information for the county and the state.
I thought you had done that, but I wondered if it happened across the state. Like
So it depends on your county. So I'm from Erie County. We do not have public comment or any during our legislature sessions. So I can't speak to any of the legislature at all. Yeah, and actually there's more than you would think. So you're lucky that you actually have that ability still to do that down here. And you should take advantage of it because I don't have it in Erie County at all.
Real quick comment on that. I did go follow up after the fact with the Board of Elections, and they did say they took that petition and they responded to it point by point. Now I still have to get in touch with our legal department who they submitted it to and get a copy of that and see what their response actually was. But I was happy to hear that they actually took it seriously and looked at it in detail and gave a response to our legislature. So we'll get that for a future meeting and can share that with you.
So part of our strategy is we did petitions, and when I was here in the spring, a lot of you signed our petition. So what we did with those petitions is we served them in Albany. Attorney General got it, the Board of Elections got it, the party heads got it, Secretary of State got it. I'm trying to think who else. Did I miss anybody? You get the general idea. Anybody who was supposed to have got it. And then we also hand-delivered them. When I say served, it's more hand-delivered because it's not really a lawsuit. We hand-delivered them as in each county. So that was one of the things that the team in Chautauqua did, is they hand-delivered it. And maybe you remember the date. Do you remember when you went?
Let's see, end of July? End of July.
Yeah, okay. I remember the date. It's the 27th of July that we did it in Erie, or of June. But in any case, it was hand-delivered, and we got proof back that it was hand-delivered to people. And in the local level, and the county level, it was given to the Board of Elections, the DA, the legislature, each of the party heads. Did you guys do that?
The sheriff.
And the sheriff, exactly. And the sheriffs are key. Yeah. So that was part of our strategy. And then what's coming is notice of claims. And I believe Erica ran around on a day off she had and actually served them. And we actually have revised notice of claims coming out because there's some things we wanted to add to it, and then lawsuits. We can't find an attorney to handle the case for us at all, especially since Giuliani got disbarred. No one will take it up, so we're doing it pro se. So we'll all just become lawyers, that's all. Yes?
Your comment about the sheriffs, you said they're key. Could you explain more about how the county sheriff can react to voter fraud?
Well, they can investigate. So there's only certain things that we can do as citizens, like we can do freedom of information law requests, but your sheriff can actually dig a lot deeper. And so what we did was took some of the stolen identity, the cloned voters, and some of those things, and we have a legal report that we tried to meet with each of the county sheriffs to show them. Hopefully they'll begin an investigation and look into it. And how did that work out in Chautauqua County?
Sheriff Buttrell was very pleasant, and he allowed us well over an hour of the meeting time, so I was very happy to do that.
Do we know if he started an
I haven't heard
investigation?
anything since. I'm not sure if he can comment on the investigation. I did email him and tell him they were going to be sharing our canvassing information if that was helpful to them, so.
Right, and that would be part of it, is that either it can go with the report if we've already got it done, or we can share it with him later. Yeah. So let's get back to the number assignment. So like I said, votes are attached to your state board of election number, okay, and that's what one looks like. Next screen. We've been told that the numbers are assigned sequentially, okay? So it would be like going to your deli counter at the grocery store. You get a number to get your cold cuts, right? The next person gets the next number. If you graph that, first come, first serve, it would be a 45-degree slope, looking something like this. Next slide. So this is Broome and Cattaraugus counties. It's a scatter plot of assigned SBOE ID numbers and county ID numbers. And that's what the graphs look like. So something's different, right? Doesn't look logical, doesn't look innocent. We've got lots of, some things aren't really even angled. Next slide. And here's NASA. Erie looks like this.
So it's a random number generator.
It should be. It should be sequential, right? But somehow, yes, there's a random number gen, right? Next slide. So one of the questions we asked is, how would one keep track of and find the falsified registrations? Because we found falsified registrations, so votes could be assigned to them. And that goes back to, I don't remember whose question it was, like, how does that person get the other vote? So that's kind of what I'm trying to answer here a little bit. There are 20 million records in New York State. They're randomly dispersed, or so we thought they were randomly dispersed, millions of which are legitimate. Next slide. What we found is what we're calling the voter matrix, weaponized voter rolls. We found a hidden sort order in the New York State voter rolls that are used to rapidly assign invalid votes to invalid registrants. And that's just a depiction of what happens. Next slide. So it was buried under 6 layers of code, deliberately obscured and concealed. And it's based on rep units. So if there are any mathematicians in here, that's just a multiple of the same digit. So 11, 111, 1,111, 11,111, you get the idea. It's dependent on the relationship between the SBOE ID numbers and the CID numbers. It's algorithmically produced. A map that differentiates between innocent and falsified registration. And the key thing here, we believe it uses external software to assign fake votes to invalid registrates or those cloned voters or those cloned registrations. It's very complicated to explain. It was hidden so deeply, it's super complicated to explain. On our website, auditny.com, if you go to our Rumble page, and up on top of it, I think it's the very first hyperlink is our Rumble page. There's a series of 15 Dr. Zark Election 101 series. They're in a New York Minute is kind of the name of them. They're about 1 minute to 2 minutes long. It takes you from the basics of what is a voter, or what's an SBOEID number, all the way up and explains very simply how the research team found this and explains it a little better. If you want even a deeper look, there's a 2-hour video that Dr. Zark, who actually is one of our researchers, did that goes through the whole thing, even how he found it. It was definitely a miracle that he found it. Yeah. So the 2 depictions are just some graphs that he made to try to explain it. This is the first 30 rows of the voter matrix in 4 counties, and it's kind of hard to see so far away, but you can see colorized that it does appear to be some patterns in the colors, and if you looked closely, you'd see all the ones. And it has to do with the gap between the CID number and the SBOEID number, and it's marking those falsified registrations so you can find them later. I think of it kind of like, I'm going to date myself here, but like the old card Cadillacs when you went to the library and you'd look through a whole bunch of them and there would be one that kind of the librarian had marked because someone had taken the book out, that kind of an idea. Think of that in terms of records on the computer. Next slide. The crazy thing is we didn't just find one, we found 4 so far. There's one in every county. The spiral matrix is found in 52 counties. The reverse spiral is found in 5 counties. The metronome in 4 counties, and the blur in 1 county. And we've named them. So these graphs should look familiar. I showed you them in the beginning. Interestingly, we grouped these counties prior to the discovery of the matrix. So the problems we found in them, we'd already grouped them together. Reverse spiral counties have greater vote count discrepancies than any other counties. And the metronome counties, those are the ones, the brick that I showed you, Erie and Nassau, those have higher vote registrations than any other county. Next slide. And we found it in other states. So this is Harris County, Texas. You can see kind of almost a whole bunch of those little bricks, right? And that's Ohio is the other one. We, on our website, auditny.com, under the latest tab, if you look in there, there's an article that was written in Red Voice where they go through what we found in New Jersey voter rolls. And they pretty much got that one cracked, the research team. So we've got definitely New York, definitely New Jersey, and we're working with several other states looking at their voter rolls, trying to find, see if we can figure out how it's working. So that's kind of the worst of it. Somebody's selecting the people we vote for. So when you go to your legislatures and they don't seem to respond, you gotta wonder, what do they, I don't know if they know, but they're not responding to we the people because we the people aren't picking who, is serving us because of what's going on in the voter rolls. So what can you do? I wish I could say in New York we've had a lot of, switching and, not switching, work done in terms of our election law and changing things. Some other states have had a little bit more luck. It's definitely an uphill battle. But the one thing you can do is vote. Vote, vote, vote. The Kerry Lake election proved that you can break free of this whole matrix and selection process by the number of people that show out and the unpredictability of it. So we say vote in person. If you only can vote by absentee ballot, go, that's what you got to do, vote. But if you can vote in person, please do so. That's the one thing that's the hardest. They can't manipulate votes as readily. So vote in person. We say on the day, but apparently the model that Carrie Lake followed with her team is they just push people to try to vote in person even during the early voting, and so much came in that they couldn't keep up with some of the steal, we'll say. Yes?
Now, in Arizona, they're gonna pressure the last day. For
The-
most voters to walk on the last day.
Yeah, I think they're trying to make it unpredictable.
Corruption, they won't have time for a lot of corruption because there won't be any length of time involved.
Hopefully, we'll see, yeah, right, but basically that if they can't plan for it. Did everybody see 2,000 Mules here?
Yes.
Okay, if you didn't, there's lots of copies out there. Find a friend, borrow it, watch it, because it's the other piece of what I'm explaining with the matrix. Like, you still have to have, a piece of paper that matches. So it's kind of the other piece, we believe, to what the voter matrix shows. So vote in person, take grandma, take your kids, take your aunt, take everybody, your neighbor, help get people to the polls to vote. Volunteer to be a poll watcher at the Board of Elections. Usually you go to your County Board of Elections webpage and sign up. They need help.
It's not volunteer, you get paid.
I know. How much do you get paid? It's volunteer. It is. It's a long day. You're there from 5 in the morning till 9 at night or something like that, and you get paid a small amount of money. So yes, it is a paid position, but basically you're volunteering to do it because you want to help your country, and you want to help your county, and you want to make sure that people who come in, that it's done properly, right? So volunteer. As a poll worker, there's not much you can do except push back if something happens. If you see something, say something, go to your supervisor, don't be afraid to go up the chain of command. You might not be asked back, but that's all right. Volunteer with New York Citizens Audit. Go to auditny.com. We're working hard. I mean, we are trying to take what we found and push back on in our counties and in our state, and actually possibly even at a national level, hopefully. So we need help with canvassing. We need help in these county strike teams so that we can visit some of these legislatures. Let's see, what else? Volunteer with your political party. Most of the candidates actually have people that watch or observe at each of the poll locations or some of the poll locations. So that would be one way that you could help. If a voter goes in there and says, I was told that they didn't vote, or that they did vote, sorry, and they say they didn't, that'd be something that you could, if you were working for a candidate, that you could send up and maybe they look into it. See something, say something, make a report to the Board of Elections, to the candidates. We have a form on our webpage that you can report any issue to. We have some theories about what's happening, that we're seeing happening, and we just need data to support those theories. So if you hear of anybody with any issues, please have them go to our webpage and fill out that report. Demand action from elected officials. It sounds like you guys are already talking about doing that. You might not get a response, but if you call and then 50 other people call, that starts to raise the level of pressure you're putting on somebody. And maybe this time it doesn't work, but maybe the next time they listen to you. You can't stop. I know I skipped one. There's a question about drop boxes. I've been told that New York State doesn't have drop boxes anymore, but we know when you go and look for them like online, they show you sites. So that'd be one thing. What does your county have? Do you have drop boxes? Are they working for this election? Is there video surveillance? Are they in a public place like the fairgrounds, or are they in an office? How does that work? So it'd be something to find out for sure. If you go to vote in person and you're told that you already voted, don't just walk out the door and blame, well, it's just a mistake. Call the sheriff. Make a report of identity theft. And don't let them tell you it's not a big deal. We don't want to waste law enforcement's time, make a big deal. We've been too nice, somebody said that. We've been too nice. You know, this is your vote, and your vote combined with all of our votes is what gets, you know, elects people. And so definitely make a stink about it. And then I say run for office. We need good quality people who are honest and who care about this country. Next slide. Election transparency. So what does that look like? What are we hoping for a couple of election cycles down the road when we're all successful? We want one day of voting, unless you're military or there's some extraneous special reason why that doesn't happen. One vote, voter ID, on paper, in person, no machines. And the voter rolls are on a machine or on a computer or database. That's a machine too. Hand counts. I'd like to see precincts be smaller, so it could be done locally, hand counts, but for that you need volunteers. So they have, you know, we have to have volunteers to do those hand counts and check. Full forensic audits, just random. I want an audit. It should happen. That's transparency.
I read somewhere on Facebook that Carl Palladino is challenging the votes in Cattaraugus County. Is that true?
I know he did Freedom of Information law requests to get records to look at it. I don't know if he's actually gotten to the point of challenging it, but I know that he was looking at the records. There was several stories about that, yes. So that part of that is true, but I don't know about the challenge. I mean, as far as I know, there hasn't been a lawsuit or anything.
Yeah, I misspoke. It wasn't a challenge, it's what you said.
So he's looking at the numbers, that's what I understand, yeah. Which would...
Whenever anything like this happens, it's a process of step by step.
Right, exactly. So he's trying to see what happened. You know, I mean, I don't know, maybe his internal numbers were different than what ended up happening. Interestingly enough, I don't believe it was Chautauqua, but there were 2 counties that were using Dominion for the first time, Dominion machines for the first time. So,
We
yeah.
just got all new machines.
Oh, and you got all new,
Yeah, I questioned
yeah.
at our training at the poll, for training, we got very defensive about it.
Yeah.
Very defensive.
Some of what happens in New York is going to be dependent on what happens elsewhere in the country. So even though it seems rather hopeless here, remember that we still are part of 49 other states, and there are battles raging in those other states over these machines. And if you follow the news recently in Georgia, for example, there was Tennessee, it started in, there was a computer glitch, we'll call it, in Tennessee, and they found that same glitch now in Georgia, I don't remember the exact percentage, in those machines. So some of the things that are going to happen, that are happening elsewhere in the country, do have an effect on us. And if eventually enough states have problems, you know, that will affect what happens here. So, and the voter integrity groups, or groups such as us, grassroots groups, we are collaborating. We're not like one big group all together, but we're collaborating and sharing ideas and what works, what doesn't work, that kind of thing. You know, even just manuals, Dominion manuals sometimes. Yes?
I've heard that Dominion voting machines has an office in Toronto, and you share it with George Soros.
I've heard the same thing, and the first part of that is definitely true. They are, you know, they have offices elsewhere. I'm not 100% sure about that second piece, but I did hear the same thing.
They have an undercover guy go in and videotape it, they are in the same building.
Yeah, it could be true. Yeah, exactly. So, all right, next slide. Our constitutional republic, not democracy, we are a constitutional republic, needs engaged, knowledgeable, and active citizens. If we do nothing, nothing happens. And we, the people, are the miracle. Together we bring back transparency, honesty, and faith in our elections. Next slide. Is there any other questions? I don't think there's another slide. Just volunteering at auditny.com. And we actually have an exciting thing. We are now a nonprofit. Our nonprofit status came through over the summer, so we can take donations. So if you can't help in person and you can help by donating, we have to fund all these lawsuits. So when you serve a lawsuit, there's fees associated with that. So we could use some help. And I came up with the idea of doing $20.20 as a donation. So, right, for 2020, the election, making them uncomfortable. Was a meme going around that one person stood up. It was the first picture. I should actually have it. And then the next picture is like 2 or 3 people standing up. And then the third picture, like everybody's standing up. Well, just imagine we're that 1 or 2 people right now, but more of us hopefully will start standing up as people get awakened to what's going on. So that's the good news. That's the hope, right? All right. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Kim. That was awesome. Great information. We shouldn't give up because it took us this long to get here. It's going to take time to change this.